Hello guys, how are you doing? In this video, we're going to be looking at inverse functions, and we're going to look at the mapping diagram method for now. When we're talking about inverse functions, we are talking about functions which reverse or undo another function. So they reverse or undo another function. If a function f maps a number n onto m, then the inverse of that function maps m onto n. Now, if you remember from my first video when I was talking about one-to-one functions and one-to-many functions, I did say that we don't have a one-to-many function. So because of this, we don't have an inverse for a many-to-one function, right? So there's no inverse for a many-to-one inverse. So always remember these two things. Moving on to an example, we are asked to find the inverse of the function f where f of x is equal to 5x minus 2 all over 3. And we're going to draw a diagram. Remember, we said in this video, we're talking about mapping diagram method. So that is what we are going to draw. You say f of x is equal to 5x minus 2 all over 3. We then start by drawing the mapping diagram for this function f of x. If you haven't watched my first video on dealing with functions, please do so. I'll put it in the link so that you understand these steps. We start with x and we look at what was done to x. So we multiplied by 5 to get 5x, and then we subtracted 2 to get 5x minus 2, and then we divided by 3. And we got the function 5x minus 2 over 3. Now, for us to then find the inverse of this function, we are going to start, for illustration purposes, I'm going to start from the right going to the left. We're going to start with our x. We always start with our x. We look at this function, we start with x, and then we are moving towards the left. Remember, we said an inverse function, right, is one whereby we are reversing or undoing whatever we did. If we divide it by 3, that means we are going to multiply by 3. After multiplying by 3, we then get our 3x. The second step, we had subtracted 2. In this example, we are going to add 2. And when we add 2, we end up with 3x plus 2. The next step was to multiply by 5. The inverse of multiplying is dividing by 5. And once we divide by 5, we get 3x plus 2 all over 5. The inverse function, denoted by this f1 of x, the one that we had, is equal to 3x plus 2 all over 5. So this is how you get the inverse of a function using the mapping diagram. You first draw the mapping diagram of that function as we did in 1, and then in the second one you are reversing every step that you did. If you check, we divided by 3, so in this first step we are multiplying, and then we subtracted 2, and in this step we added 2, and then we multiplied by 5, and in this step we divided by 5. So you always do the opposite of what you'd have done for the function. I'm going to have example number 2. So starting with a, which is f of x is equal to 5x minus 2. We're going to map this function, so I'll just name it number 1, and starting from x, we are going to multiply by 5 in order for us to get 5x. And then we subtracted 2 in order for us to get 5x minus 2. In this second one, we're going to do the opposite for us to get the function. So we start from the right. So we always start with x. And then we look at the first command from the right, which was subtracting 2. So we're going to add 2. And if we add 2, we end up with x plus 2. We look at this, we multiply it by 5. So in this case, we are going to divide by 5. And we get our function as x plus 2 all over 5. The inverse of this function for part A is x plus 2 all over 5. Moving on to part B, we have f of x is equal to 5 multiplied by x minus 2. Remember, always starting from x, we get x, right? And then we look at what we have in the brackets. We subtracted 2, so that was minus 2, and we got x minus 2. Then we multiplied by 5, and we got the final as 5x minus 2. Now, we want to find the inverse. Starting from the right, x, we started by multiplying by 5. So doing the opposite is divide by 5. And if we do so, we get x over 5. Then we subtracted minus 2. That means we're going to add plus 2. And we get x over 5 plus 2. The inverse function is x over 5 plus 2. Part C, f of x is equal to 3 multiplied by 2x plus 4. Starting with x, we multiplied our x by 2, so that's times 2, and we get 2x. And then we added plus 4, and we got 2x plus 4. And then we multiplied everything by 3, and we got our 2x plus 4. So that was for this function that we have. Now, for the inverse, we're going to do the opposite. Starting with x, look at what we did. We multiplied by 3, so we're going to divide by 3, and we get x over 3. And then we added 4. That means we're going to subtract 4, and we get x over 3 minus 4. Then we multiplied by 2. Again, we're going to divide by 2 to get x over 3 minus 4, all divided by 2. So now, to put this in a proper manner, we then have our inverse function of x is equal to x over 6 minus 2. This is the same as 1 over 6x minus 2. So that is how we get the inverse of a function using the mapping diagram. So you first map the diagram of the original function, and then you do the opposite for you to get the inverse of that function, following the steps that you would have done for f of x. See you in the next video. Please do hit the subscribe button.